You know, when we think about fascism, we usually picture these really rigid, monolithic ideologies, right? But Spanish fascism? Well, it's a different beast entirely. From the moment it was born, it's been built on this massive, fundamental contradiction that makes it completely unique and, honestly, fascinating to unpack. To really get to the heart of it, we first have to understand a specific Spanish concept. It's the word maricón. Now, yes, it's a homophobic slur, but in Spanish culture, it also means something deeper. It describes a person who's unreliable, treacherous, someone without any firm core values. And the great irony here, the thing that's almost unbelievable, is that this very idea, the one Spanish fascists love to throw at their enemies, perfectly defines the movement itself. And that, right there, is the central idea for this whole explainer. If you want to understand the history of Spanish fascism, and even where it is today, you have to grasp this built-in ambiguity. It's this constant conflict between what it preaches and what it actually does. This is a movement literally defined by the very betrayal it claims to hate so much. So, where did this all start? Well, you have to go right back to the very beginning. The contradiction was baked in from day one, at the founding of the original fascist party, the Falange. So, to set the stage, you've got to understand just how different Spanish fascism was right from the get-go. I mean, you look at its cousins in Germany and Italy, and they were revolutionary movements. They had these socialist-inspired roots, and they were often pretty anti-church. The Spanish far right? Nope. It was the total opposite. It was reactionary, all about restoring some kind of mythic past. It was elitist, and it was deeply, fundamentally Catholic. And this contradiction, well, it was basically baked into the movement's DNA from its very first breath. I mean, just look at this slide for a second. This lays out the completely impossible foundation of the Falange. You've got three founders with worldviews that are just fundamentally incompatible. You have an aristocratic capitalist, an atheist Nazi-style socialist, and an ultra-Catholic anti-Semite. How is a movement built on those three pillars supposed to be stable? It couldn't be. It was basically designed for conflict from the get-go. Now, to be fair, other fascist movements had their own internal fights. You look at Germany, and there was this huge conflict between the more socialist, homoerotic culture of the SA and the traditionalist, capitalist wing that, well, ultimately won. But Spanish fascism was different. It kept up this incredibly rigid, chaste, and homophobic public image, while at the same time allowing for just massive contradictions in pretty much every other part of its ideology. You might be asking, how did this tiny, dysfunctional party ever come to power? And this is where the ultimate opportunist, Franco, steps onto the stage. See, Franco wasn't a true believer in any one of these things. For him, ideology was never the point. It was just a tool, a means to an end for gaining and, more importantly, holding on to power. And this is absolutely crucial to understand. Franco didn't rise up through the Falange ranks. He was an outsider who looked at this fractured, chaotic movement and saw it as the perfect vehicle for his own ambition. He didn't create it, he hijacked it. So how did he do it? Not by getting everyone in a room to find common ground, that's for sure. He did it with pure brute force. He issued this decree of unification, which basically just smashed all the right-wing parties together, including their rivals, the Carlists, who the Phalangists had literally been fighting in the streets, into one big state party. And when the original Falangist leaders, guys like Manuel Hidela, resisted this hostile takeover, Franco had them thrown in prison and came close to having them executed. This wasn't unity by consensus, it was unity by coercion. If you want the perfect example of Franco's cynical pragmatism, just look at his stance on Jewish people. It's wild. Publicly, he was protecting Sephardic Jews because he needed funding from their bankers to fuel his coup. But privately, he was writing these incredibly vicious anti-Semitic articles under a fake name. He was playing both sides against the middle for his own personal gain. 50,000. Just think about that number. That's how many Falangist volunteers Franco sent to fight and die for Hitler on the Eastern Front. This wasn't some token gesture. The Blue Division was a massive military and ideological investment in an Axis victory. But then, by late 1943, the tide of the war was turning. Germany was starting to lose. And Franco, ever the survivor, pulls the plug. He orders the Blue Division home. And this quote from their commander when they get back is just so revealing. He is furious. He says they are returning against our will, that Spain is being forced to obey its own enemies. He means the Allies. This is the sound of a bitter, betrayed ally, not some neutral observer. In that moment right there, it just lays the whole thing bare. The regime's heart was with the Nazis, but its one true loyalty was to its own survival. It was forced to betray its ideological friends just to save its own skin. That is the schizophrenic, unprincipled core of the entire project. And on the world stage, this pattern of betrayal just kept going. This timeline is really a masterclass in political survival. First, he's best buds with Nazi Germany. Then, in 1943, when it looks like they're going to lose, he completely abandons them. After the war, he aligns with Arab nations against the new state of Israel, and just 5 years later, he ditches them to sign military pacts with the United States. There are no principles here. It's just a desperate and, successful bid to stay in power. But if you want the single, clearest, most jaw-dropping example of this treacherous character in action, you have to look at the regime's flip-flop on Freemasonry. During the Spanish Civil War, their anti-Masonic stance wasn't just talk. It was a murderous policy. We're talking thousands of Masons and people they suspected of being Masons hunted down and killed. This was supposed to be a fundamental, non-negotiable belief. Or so it seemed. And this timeline just says it all. In the late 30s, they are systematically exterminating Masons. It is core to their identity. But then, fast forward to 1953, Franco desperately needs a military pact with the United States. And suddenly what happens? American Masonic lodges are being set up on new U.S. military bases in Spain. The only ones allowed in the whole country for 40 years. So why the complete 180? Was it some profound change of heart? Not even close. The reason was pure, cold, pragmatic gain. A foundational belief was just tossed right out the window the second it became inconvenient for holding on to power. The history of the regime is just littered with these mind-bending examples of saying one thing and doing the absolute opposite. Okay, get this. While Franco was secretly writing these absolutely vicious anti-Semitic articles under a pen name, Joachim Bohr, to cozy up to the Nazis, his government, later on after World War II, launched this massive propaganda campaign to paint him as the great savior of the Jews. It is just an absolutely breathtaking, shameless example of playing both sides. So after Franco cemented his power, you'd think the fighting would stop, right? Nope. A whole new internal war kicked off. This time, a battle for the soul of the regime itself. It pitted the original Phalangists against this powerful, ultra-Catholic sect called Opus Dei. And this battle had very real, very serious consequences. The original Phalangists, they were pushing for this socialist, self-sufficient economy. The result? Total disaster. Widespread famine, economic collapse. Opus Dei, on the other hand, was pushing for U.S.-aligned capitalism, a model specifically designed to win over Franco's new American friends. So, which model do you think won out? Yep, the one that served Franco's power. This wasn't just about economics either. It was an institutional coup. The Jesuits, who had been a huge part of the rise of Spanish fascism, got shoved aside for Opus Dei. And the irony is just staggering. Opus Dei was seen by many as a carbon copy of the old Jesuit model. And then, decades later, those same Jesuits, the former fascist allies, would become linked with Marxist liberation theology in Latin America. It's just another complete head-spinning reversal. Okay, so why are we digging through all this old history? Because this legacy of contradiction, of betrayal, of pragmatic shapeshifting, it's not just history. It is very much alive and kicking in Spain's political landscape today. Just look at what is maybe the most glaring modern contradiction of them all. The historic Spanish far-right was violently anti-Semitic and pro-Arab. Today's main far-right party, Vox, is fiercely pro-Israel, basically just copying the playbook of other modern European far-right parties. It is a total 180, and it's driven by modern political convenience, not some profound change of heart. And yet, for all that change, there is one area where they have not budged an inch. While other European far-right parties have softened their stances on social issues, some even have openly gay leaders, Spanish fascism remains uniquely and extremely homophobic. That's one ideological pillar they have refused to abandon. And hey, don't just take my word for it. The data makes it pretty clear. This chart shows reported hate incidents in Spain, and the primary victims, by a really significant margin, are LGBTQ+ people. This deep-seated homophobia is a direct line connecting the regime's past to the present. And this whole macho iberico posture is just completely shattered by modern reality. Far from being some kind of bastion of traditional masculinity, Spain today has the second highest percentage of people in the world who openly identify as LGBTQ+. And as if that weren't enough, a recent government estimate revealed a gut-wrenching number: over 440,000 victims of pederasty within the Spanish Catholic Church, the very institution the movement claims as its moral bedrock. So the conclusion here is blunt. The whole ideal of the macho iberico is a complete fantasy, a myth that is contradicted by the facts at every single turn. And all of this builds to a final, central paradox. It brings us right back to where we started. So if it's not about a consistent ideology, or Catholicism, or masculinity, then what is it? What actually defines this political tradition? The answer is just one word: power. A chameleon-like ability to adapt, to betray any principle, and become whatever is necessary, all for the sole purpose of gaining it and holding on to it. And this is the ultimate paradox. It's a textbook case of psychological projection. The movement accuses its enemies of being exactly what it is: treacherous, without principle, relativistic. It's projecting a perfect description of itself onto everyone else. And that leaves us with one final question to think about. When a political movement's only truly consistent feature throughout its history is betrayal, what is there really left to believe in?